Hello, folks. This is Ruth Meed again with another in my episodes of Homeschooling 101. This is going to be day 7. And I'm going to probably be floating back and forth between the screen a little bit and just talking because I've got a couple things I want to actually show you today as I'm working my way through this. And again, who am I? I am a professor of special education. I taught that for 7 years, and then I've got 27 years of experience working in the classroom in several different environments. And so I'm offering you different tips and tricks as you're working your way through these days of trying to figure out how to take on homeschooling and what you should do and ways to get started mindset wise so that you're ready to help your kids and you are learning and growing together in a biblical way. That's my passion, is to make sure that anything that I'm telling you or teaching you is going to be presented from the biblical perspective so that you know that what you're doing is not just some silly idea, but it's actually genuinely biblical. And there are reasons in the Word of God why we would do what we do in different things. So how to think and what to do from a biblical perspective. First of all, I'm going to say it again. Don't panic. You're not super mom or dad right now. You are waiting in a trusting period. So you're adjusting your pace and your mindset to that way of thinking. This is not, you can't take everything on all at once. You can't solve all the problems all at once. Just be ready to take it one day at a time. One day at a time, not 1 week, and for sure, not a month or a year, just one day at a time. That's all we can handle right now with everything that's going on. Sometimes it might be just the next hour. I can do the next hour, or I can do the next 30 minutes. Then when that's done, you can tell yourself, we can do the next 30 minutes. And then you breathe, and you can do the next 30 minutes. God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power and of a love and of a controlled or disciplined mind, 1 Timothy 1:7. So instead, we're going to fix our eyes on the Word of God and on truth and on hope. We're going to start with fixing our mind on God's Word. And you're going to keep memorizing these with your children. So we review the verses that we did last week. And again, we're adding some new ones on this theme this week. So the new verses for this week, because they have similar phrasing, again, they'll be easier to learn, even though they're a little bit longer. Deuteronomy 31, 7-8. And Moses called to Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and of a good courage. And the Lord is he who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not fail nor forsake you. Do not fear nor be dismayed. Joshua 1:9. Have not I commanded you? Be strong and of a good courage. Do not be afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you in all places wherever you go. 1 Chronicles 22:13b. Sorry. The Lord charged Moses concerning Israel, be strong and of a good courage. Do not fear nor be dismayed. So our theme, be strong, be courageous, do not fear, do not be dismayed. So last week's review verses, we're going to go over those again because the more you see them, the more they get settled into your mind and heart. 1 Thessalonians 5:24, faithful is he who calls you, who also will do it. Philippians 1:6, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will be faithful to complete it in you. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And 1 Corinthians 15:58, therefore be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. So day 7, what to think? We're in the second week, a new week. But guess what? We're just going to automatically assume that we need to gently and with fun keep daily reestablishing the routines for yourself and for your children. Make sure they know what things are going, where you're supposed to put things, and cleaning up after themselves. Add in some chores to their daily routines and add some incentives for those who do it correctly without reminders or who do it with the right attitude. So if you want some suggestions of chores, things like setting the table, washing the dishes, taking the laundry, folding the laundry if they're a little bit older, helping wipe the table down. Even littles can learn how to wipe the tables and the chairs down. Sweeping the floor, taking the trash out. All kinds of little things that you can get your kids to do for little chores that are things that need to be done. You don't need to chase all of this. If you've got munchkins, you need to teach them how to be part of the process of working in your house. And I'm going to remind you again today that you're going to just set these habits, these routines in every day. Don't make the assumption that your children already know. Remember 1 Peter 1 again. Peter doesn't hesitate to remind the adults. And we need to be much freer about reminding our children because they are younger, they are weaker, and it's okay to keep reminding them. If you tell them at the outset what the expectation is, because you do, before you do the day, things will absolutely go smoother simply because you let them know up front. Remember, we got to put things in this place. They got to go back there. We got to check the schedule here. Where do you find the schedule? Oh, it's on the fridge. Good. Okay, go check the schedule. Tell me what's next and get them taking ownership for some of these things. Once you get in the habit of just doing this automatically, you're not going to be standing there thinking, why can't my kids just get it and do it? We just quietly remember that God doesn't chide us when we need help and encouragement and wisdom. And we just assume they need that constant reminder, and then you just do it. If it completely takes out the frustration and emotion, if you just know that it's a necessary thing and it's just part of being a parent and you just say it anyway, like it just comes out. And sometimes if you turn it into fun things, then it's going to help them. If you've got little munchkins with ADD or ADHD, then you just say, okay, so what's the next thing? Or tell them what the next thing is. Once I got into routine with some of my kids, I would just tell them, okay, so I need you to stop and think for a minute. What is the next thing? Can you tell me what the next thing is you're supposed to do? And they'll stand there for a minute and go, oh, yeah, okay. And then they go and do. And so it's, again, just patiently helping them, say this, we're only in the second week though. So they're still developing the routines, but as you get going, you're going to get to a place where you can say to them, okay, so what's the next step? And just ask them, don't, without anger, without frustration, just what's the next step? And you'll start to learn fairly quickly how much they're able to take ownership. Some kids might not be able to do it as quickly as others, but some will be able to take it on themselves. So when you're doing these fun activities, you can do silly little things like sing to them or whisper it out, or outside voice, what are we doing next? Or just some kind of little things so that it's different each time and they know that you're just having fun with them. So a quick reminder, at least 10 minutes before you want to get an activity finished, or 15, depending on the age of your littles, you need to start talking about the cleanup process and then have fun walking them through it. You do need to have fun with this every single day after every class period for everyone for at least the first 15 to 30 days. It takes a while for kids to get into a routine. And once they get into that routine, then they'll be okay. But until then, you want them, you just want to let them know this is what's next, or remind them what's next, or ask them if they can remember what's next. Keep encouraging them, even with their particular reward or motivation that we talked about yesterday in day 6. I gave you that whole chart of ideas of ways to find out what motivates your children. So possibly use some of those ideas. And always be affirming your children by saying things like, you are my beloved child and I am well pleased with your effort. Notice I did not say, I'm well pleased that you did it perfectly. We want the effort to be there because perfection is not instantly attained in this life. We press on, as Paul said, but we also realize that we're weak creatures. And there's a couple verses in the Old Testament that I've got at the bottom as a reminder again, where God, when he helped the children of Israel come into the promised land, he said, little by little, I will remove the things so that you can slowly but surely take over the land. So we develop ownership, we develop our ability to take on things little by little. Another suggestive phrase, you're a fantastic little assistant. I greatly appreciate your help and effort and desire to be organized and to stay on top of things, because God tells us no matter what we do in 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. And in Colossians 3:17, and what you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, giving thanks to God and the Father by him. This includes cleaning, organizing, and keeping things neat. So now that you have things organized in a basic routine, have you also taken the time to do a few things with reading the books? Make sure that you're reading at least 15 minutes a day with your children. So what to do? So what I'm going to do is start covering some basic academic educational concepts that make for good teaching. These are all research-based and also biblical. And I'm not going to bog you down with a bunch of educational citations and those kinds of things. If you want all the books and information, I can certainly give you that. But at this point, I'm just going to tell you, these are research-based things that that are evident. They've done a lot of research to show that these kinds of things work when you're teaching children. And my goal has been to make sure that I'm adding in the biblical references and the biblical applications or the biblical principles to show you that it's not just something you read in an education book. God actually had it in the Bible already. There's lots of educational principles in the Bible, and this is going to be one of them. So the first one I'm going to talk about is fluency. So some basic concepts or ideas when it comes to fluency and the principle of fluency. I thought about when you want to do something fluently, you want to be able to do it quickly, immediately, and just on task. So the word immediately is found 55 times in the Bible. It's a key concept. It's found in Mark 4, in the parable of the soils. Things happened immediately in this narrative. Certain things needed to be done right away. A similar word is found in the King James, and it is straightway, and that's 42 times in the Bible. For your reading time, if you have older children, do a study of these two words in the Bible in the situations where something like this happens immediately. It's a rich read just going down through those verses. You can have them pick one verse a week to memorize. Now, I thought I was going to show you this, but I can't remember if I kept it up. No, I didn't keep it up, so I'm not going to go hunting for it right now. But you can use Bible Gateway if you don't have eSword on your computer, any one of those, and just literally type in the word immediately, and all the references to immediately or straightway will pop up, and you can read down through this. So with your bigger kids, you can get them to study what are some of the things that need to be done immediately, or what happens immediately in certain situations. Because there are times even, it's not even so much you do, but Jesus immediately healed certain people. Like there's just verses. It's a fascinating read. So go after that and take the time to read it. For your little children, though, you're going to cover just a basic concept of wanting to do things quickly and accurately. Now, this is not quickly speedy, but responding immediately and making an effort to try to do things on a schedule. And perhaps they can memorize just a basic phrase. So Matthew 4:20, and straightway they left their nets and followed him. And that's referring to the disciples. Or there's a negative one that has the word immediate in it. James 1:24, for he beholds himself and goes his way, and straightway immediately forgets what kind of person he is. So that's actually a negative way that something can happen immediately. Learning to do things right away or quickly does aid with your other academic areas, but it is a skill that has to be developed over time, and littles need to be able to do this at their pace. We need to remember to go at their pace, not just ours. They're still just learning. So here's a real life example for you. I've been driving for years, over 500,000 miles on 3 different cars, and I was asked to teach some people how to drive. I discovered very quickly how many things I do automatically when I get into a car without even thinking. You put your seatbelt on when you sit down. You put the foot on the brake before you turn on the ignition. You turn the wheel back, or you don't turn it sometimes when you're backing up. When you're learning to drive a car, you're conscious and thinking about every single skill that's involved: turning, braking, signaling, wipers in the rain, headlights, slowing as needed, speeding up as needed, anticipating other cars around you, just to name a few. At the beginning, you have to talk your way through each one until it becomes second nature of being a skilled driver. Once you have them down, you're doing them with fluency, no thought, and efficiency. You're just maneuvering at high speeds on the interstate. The slightest wrong move at those kind of speeds is deadly, but the skill carefully developed from the time you were back in your backyard on a bike years ago grew in you to the point where you can avoid a collision, as God has enabled me to do in some scary situation over those hundreds of thousands of miles. So how does this apply to academics? This is true for all your main subject areas: math, reading, and writing. If a child can develop fluency in their ability to pull out math facts from their head, they can figure problems quickly. If they have a hard time memorizing but learn other fast strategies that will increase their speed, this will also enable them to figure out their math quickly. For example, there's 2 tricks for the 9s that I'm going to tell you about. You can take a column and you can get your children to write it in a line and just do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 down the page, and then come back right beside it on the right hand side, because some of your kids get this mixed up, so make sure you put on the right hand side, and start at 9 and go 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And when you do, you have 0, 9, 1, 8, 2, 7, 3, 6, 4, 5, and you've got the 9s in order. Now, the other thing you can do is you can teach your children to do it with their fingers. So this is what happens when you do it with your fingers. If I've got my fingers, let's see, I got to pull it back far enough so you can see it. 9 times 1, we'll start with, we'll go over on this side. Yeah, because it has to be this way. It's going to be hard for me to put this figured out. But if I do 9 times 1, what's left here? It's 9. If I do 9 times 1, I've got a 1 on this side for your tens place, and then 8 on this side, which is 18. And then 9 times 3 is 20, and there's 7 on this side for 27. 9 times 4 is 30, and there's 6 on this side. You got to make sure, sometimes you got to teach them to pay attention to the sum. Sum's actually counting as a number there, but you got 3 here and 6 over here. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 6 is 54. 9 times 7, and it keeps on going like that. So that's another little trick for doing the nines with your kids. And some kids will, it's kind of fun to teach them these because they get all excited and they will say, I've had kids just go, what, really? And they thought it was really cool that they could actually do that. So there is actually a trick for just about every one of the times tables for how you can memorize them or even use your fingers to do these strategies. And this is, if you've got munchkins who can't memorize quickly, and you teach them some of these strategies, it will help them. So they still, even if they can't pull it out of their head quickly, they still have another strategy they can use very quickly that will help them to figure out their math facts. So it's not always about just being able to memorize them. It's about being able to memorize them and or come up with another strategy that will still help them to get it quickly. So that's the idea with fluency. Fluency isn't always about doing it exactly the same way all the time. The same is true with reading. The more quickly a child can recognize and read words, the better their reading comprehension will be. Some key things with these ideas that I'm going to suggest to you. When you do this fluency, create a little bar graph or chart where your child can actually track how they're doing from day to day, and they can see their own growth. I don't advise pitting children against each other. This can create discouragement. However, if you've got siblings that are close to the same age and they seem to be able to handle a little bit of competition, then you could allow them to perhaps push each other a little bit more to do well. Or you might offer rewards for working hard. Remember, God did institute rewards in the Bible when he offered us the crowns for our behaviors. It's not bribery to give somebody a reward for doing good. Bribery is when you try to coerce somebody to do something wrong by giving them money. Rewards are what we get for doing right. Your job, you get paid to do your job. That's work, that's a reward. Okay, so let me show you an example of what I mean by a chart here. It's going to take me a second to share the screen. I wanted you to see this. So here's a little chart for you. And I gave you an example. So we've got a little munchkin here and say that they are at, oh, this one's not showing the numbers up this. Oh, there, yeah, there's the numbers right there. So you put the numbers up the side. Let me pick a different one and see if it shows it better. There, this is the one that's a little bit better. This one's actually done as a line graph where you can actually see your progress going up. And this is one thing I want to mention. When you're working with kids with their reading or their math facts, they'll do really well for a couple of days, and then they'll have a day that when it slumps. And it's okay. They can have a slump day. And then the next day they might go back up or they might come back to where they were. Just the goal is they want to be able to see that line slowly but surely consistently going up. And the same thing with reading. So I did this with, you know, you're working along, you're doing fine, and then all of a sudden you have a bad day and you kind of slump a little bit, but then you just keep going and you keep working at it. So you can do it as a line graph or you can do it as a bar graph. So I thought I'd show you those couple different options for doing it. But see, the numbers are up the side, so you could say, okay, they started at 22 words, and then the next day they got to 24 words. Now, if you've got really little munchkins, you're actually going to put every number in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to teach them that. If you've got older students, then you want them to get to the point where they can recognize the bigger numbers, the jumps between the numbers and the skip counting and those kind of things. So this one's actually skip counted in 5s. So if you've got kids who are in 3rd or 4th grade, then go ahead and skip count by 5s when you create the chart. But you've got the chart across the top, and then down the bottom, you put the date. How they did today, how they did the next day, how they did the next day. So you can do it that way, or you can do it in a bar graph. And again, you just put your date across the bottom. So 1st day, 2nd day, 3rd day, 4th day, however you're going to do that. So that just gives you an idea of how to set up some kind of a chart to keep track of their growth. And I've taught an awful lot of kids, and every single one of the students that I've worked with really enjoyed this chart and being able to see the chart and actually watch it grow over the course of a period of time. Now, the other thing about doing this chart is you actually can learn something about your kids and discover maybe there's something going on here with this and it may not be working for them. So these are some things that I want you to pay attention to when you're working through this stuff. Very important to watch as you work on these skills. If you've got a child who gets anxious with a timer, don't use one till they have mastered the skill and feel very, very confident. Instead, you could have them read a passage or do some math facts, but don't even tell them you're timing them. Just say, hey, go ahead and start working on that. And then you set the timer, but they don't know you're doing it. So then that gives you an idea without them feeling the pressure of how long it takes them to figure out an activity. And then you could time over 2 or 3 days and say, hey, you didn't even realize I was timing you, but did you know that you're actually doing this much quicker than you did the other day? So that's awesome. You're getting better at this, really, and reward them for their effort. This is where you have the freedom as a parent to realize if this is helping or motivating your child, then keep doing it. But if it's creating stress and anxiety, do not. You never want your child trying to learn under constant stress. You do want them to feel a little bit of a challenge, but not extreme anxiety. Remember, these things will take a little bit more time to build into your routine, which is why it's all I'm going to suggest for today, because it will take a little bit for them to get this, to even figure this out the first day, for you to figure out how to present it to them, for them to start to do the graph and write the graph up, teaching them how to make that graph. It's worth the time. That's a math skill, but it's also used in your sciences, your social studies, because bar graphs show up everywhere. If you've been watching anything with the virus stuff that's been going on right now, they've got tons of graphs up there. And if they learn how to read graphs properly, they'll realize that some of the data that's presented is actually not accurately presented, because you can make a graph say whatever you want it to. But that would be a skill that you'd be teaching older kids. Your little munchkins, you're just teaching them the basic skill of what a graph looks like and how to build one, because it's used in all areas of our lives. So what are we going to do? For reading, if you're dealing with kindergartners and first graders, you're working on them recognizing their letters and the short 2- and 3-letter words, then reading simple books that are at their level. Then the grades progress. Here's a general guideline for how fast they should be able to read at a grade level. Please note, if your child's not exactly at these levels, do not panic. They have to be able to progress at their pace. Daily work will produce results if they keep working it. So I'm going to just show you this for a minute. And if you want it for your reference later, then I will have you can download it. I'll have a link in the comments below in the description below, where you can go and actually get this chart so you can actually have it for your reference. But you can see in grade 1, by the end of grade 1, the typical kid can read about 60 words per minute at their grade level. So that's important. Make sure you're not putting a 3rd grade book in front of them expecting them to read that many words in a 3rd grade book. It's going to be a 1st grade book. And then same thing with each one of the grade levels. That's a different word. So by the time they get up to 6th grade, they should be able to read 250 plus words per minute at the 6th grade reading level. This is the way that you test this. So the way that you test this, or the way you develop the skill, is by doing a strategy called repeated reading. And this is how it works. Let me describe it for you here once I pull this back up. It's long since been research-based and proven to really increase reading fluency. It's just by doing a 1-minute reading check. So what you need to do is you need to just pick up a book that's at their grade level and have your child read for 2 minutes silently to themselves from the book at their reading level. Tell them to ask you how to pronounce any word they're not sure of, and tell them the correct pronunciation immediately. Do not take time to make them sound out for this particular exercise. You can do that sounding at work with other relaxed reading activities or other things you're doing with reading. It can be any book as long as it's at their reading level. Then you have them read aloud to you or a sibling for 1 minute that exact same passage. At the beginning, it would be best if it was you that's listening to them read. I will teach you how to teach your children to work with each other on another day. I don't want to take on too much right now. Count how many words they read correctly. Create a chart so that each day they see how many words they're reading each minute correctly. Chart how many words they got right. Do not focus on errors at this point. If they read a word wrong, immediately and quickly correct it. For this particular exercise, the goal is to increase their fluency, so don't make them sound it out because they lose time. Just tell them what the word is so that they can move on quickly. Again, I'm assuming you're doing other reading where you might do more with teaching sounding out. The academic word for this term sounding out is phonemic awareness, where they recognize the letters, and phonics, where they can put those letters into groups of sounds to make a word. So think of a phone. You hear the sound when you talk into a phone. That's where they get this word phonics from. The next day, it needs to be a new passage. It cannot be the same one they read the day before, but they must read it quietly to themselves first for at least 2 minutes before you do the out loud time check. This activity takes maybe 5 minutes a day, including them charting it once you've taught them how to do the chart. And I've watched, but every child I've worked with has gained excitement as they've watched how much their reading has grown. Again, the very first day, it's going to take a while just for you to go ahead and teach them how to do the basic sit for 2 minutes and read quietly to themselves, and then read to you, and then create the chart. So that's about all you got. And that will take more than the 5 minutes on your first day because you're trying to get this all set up. But once you get into a routine, you'll get to a point where you can do it fairly quickly with them. The emphasis is on what they're doing right. Again, not errors. I've worked with extremely poor readers using this method, and they all gained confidence, every one of them, and growth. Also, they need to be okay with having days where they might not quite get as many words as the other day. And I told you that. Sometimes they'll go up and they'll be okay, and then the graph will dip, and it's okay. But over the long haul, they should see a steady growth in the chart. Depending on their ages, it may be only 1 or 2 words per day if they're in like 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade. But as they go with those old upper grades, 5th and 6th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 4th and 5th for sure, they might actually gain up to 5 or 10 words a day with what they do with this. They're never in competition with anybody else. It's only between themselves and their word count that they got the day before. The same kind of ideas apply in math. For math, in 1 minute by the end of the year, they should be able to do the following skills. So kindergartners should be able to say and recognize all their numbers 1 to 10. Grade 1, count to 20. Grade 2, they should be able to count 20 backwards and forwards, count to 100, skip count 10s, 5s, and 2s, up to 100. And then they should be able to add all their math facts 0 to 9 in 3 minutes. In grade 3, they should be able to add or subtract all math facts 0 to 20 in 3 minutes. In grade 4, they should know all their multiplication facts 0 to 9 in 3 minutes. They should know all their, and by grade 5, they should be able to know their multiplication facts to 15 in 3 minutes. For some sample sheets related to this, again, I'll have some links down below that you can access for these sheets and different ideas, or you can email me, ruth.meed@gmail.com, and I will send them to you that way. Writing. Fluency in writing is actually, as a skill, will be developed through their reading and then making notes about reading or telling stories. It's not a suggested number of words per grade. Some very simple sentences can display deeply complex ideas. For example, Jesus saves, or Jesus wept. That's only 2 words each, but both of those carry some pretty deep meaning when you think about what they're saying, and it's a more complex skill. So it's really not just about the number of words, it's about the complexity of what they're doing with their writing. As they advance into more complex books, you can focus on teaching them to expand their sentences from the simple subject verbs to compound complex skills. For instance, you can go back to the exercises suggested at the beginning and look up that word immediately and straightway and see how many times the verses are very simple in their context with the phrasing, and how sometimes they're a whole lot more complex. There's much more detailed sentences, and you could use those as an example for writing for today. Fluency in writing has more to do with writing down concepts in the older grades and thinking up more and more complex ideas quickly and easily. When you're done doing a quick check in reading and the chart, a quick check in math and the chart, then that's it for today. Again, I'm not going to jump into curriculum yet because you need to know your kids and they need to know themselves, and they, learning how to do these charting ideas and some different things where you're setting up routines into your day that they'll do on a regular basis will help you when you jump into curriculum, because you've got the basics of routines and gathering data and those kinds of things that will help you going forward. So we're just setting up some basic, simple routines and ideas before we jump into curriculum. It also helps you to know more about what's happening with you, your kids, and your routines, so that when you look at actually buying curriculum, you'll be able to evaluate the curriculum and know for sure, okay, this is going to work for Sally, but it's not going to work for Sam. So you're gonna be able to make these decisions better, and then therefore spend your money more wisely if you do it this way. their frustration will be greatly reduced, and you will be directing them in a way that they should go, so that when they're old, they will not depart from it, but will walk with the Lord and serve him. Also, knowing some basic instructional practices that work will help you to know that you're approaching the subjects correctly, and that things that might seem menial now are actually valid skills that create good learners. They're things that you put into place. So even teaching them how to do those bars and graphs and chart that every day, it'll teach them how to create them, but it will also teach them how to read them later if they're creating charts now. Remember, we grow little by little, as it says in Exodus 23:30 and Deuteronomy 7:22. When God was taking the children of Israel into the promised land, he said he was going to remove the animals and those kinds of things little by little, so that they would not be overwhelmed trying to take on the whole land and it would become desolate. So that principle's there. We learn things, we grow, we take on new things, we develop more ownership little by little as we're able to handle it. And that's a biblical principle that applies to academics. We take on stuff at the pace that we're able to handle it, so that we don't become overwhelmed with the tasks and the process. So take the process slowly and steadily, and as you do, you will see growth till they can take on more skills, and you can be able to take on more things with teaching them and not get overwhelmed. So that's again why I've done it this way. You're not taking on a whole curriculum and fixing everything at once. You're taking things slowly and steadily and developing a mindset that will help you to teach your kids the way they learn. And in so doing, prepare them for what God wants them to do. And I wish you a blessed day. Again, if you're finding value in these things, comment below, tell me things you'd like to see differently, tell me things that are working for you, and I'll be reading them and try to adjust as I'm going with adding more of these. My ultimate goal eventually is to try to develop these into a little booklet that you can buy and have them all in one shot. It's just been a process so far to get them done and kind of figure my way through it. But that would be my ultimate goal, is to try to make this a resource for you that you can keep looking back at and marking up or doing things with. So yeah, like, comment, share, tell other people about it. Feel free to let them know, and let me know ways that I can help you. And this has been my goal, is to be an encouragement and a help through this time. Be courageous, be strong, do not fear, and do not be dismayed.